Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, the Honorable Stephen Lashley, Mr. Chris Huskilson, Directors and Management of Emera and Emera Caribbean and Light and Power Limited, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Good, and welcome. I'm Jackie Marshall Clark, Corporate Communications Administrator with the Barbados Light and Power Company, and you are delighted to be here, I'm sure. It's National Energy Week in Barbados, and this has certainly provided for us the opportunity to host this lecture event in support of the week. We are a major stakeholder in the energy sector in Barbados, and you, this evening, are our key stakeholders. Thank you for accepting to be here. There are two items on our agenda this evening that I must take care of first. I want to let you know that there's a lecture, and then your questions, the two items on the agenda. For the media, we will have a special half an hour after the lecture for your special questions to Mr. Huskilson. To introduce our speaker to you this evening, ladies and gentlemen, I want to invite the President and Executive Chairman of Light and Power Holdings and the Executive Chairman of the Barbados Light and Power Company to you. She is Mrs. Sarah MacDonald. Please welcome her.
Everyone here represents a very special group of persons to us. You are our stakeholders, and we are committed to growing each and every relationship with you and keep you informed about our business, the challenges that we face, and the achievements that we accomplish along the way. Time would not permit me to discuss each of these relationships, but I will highlight one, and that is the Government of Barbados. We both acknowledge that we have to work together in many ways to benefit Barbadians on energy and beyond. Recently, we announced a major partnership with the government and the development of sports as a business sector within the economy. With Emera's commitment to both energy, government, and sport, we are funding the replacement of the lights for the National Stadium, an over $500,000 investment. I look forward to other opportunities to share more with you, but I won't keep the presenter any longer. So I am pleased to introduce Chris Huskilson, President and CEO Emera, Inc. from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Chris began his career with Nova Scotia Power in 1980. He was made Chief Operating Officer of Emera and Nova Scotia Power in July 2003 and Chief Executive Officer of Emera in 2004. Chris is a member of the Association of Professional Engineers of Nova Scotia. He serves on many not-for-profit and for-profit boards of directors. He is past chair of the Greater Halifax Partnership, the Energy Council of Canada, and the Canadian Electricity Association. Chris holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and a Master's of Science in Engineering from the University of New Brunswick. So without further ado, my boss of the last 15 years, Chris Huskilson.
It is great to be here tonight, and what I'd like to do is actually spend just a little bit of time, maybe start off, and talk a little bit about our company, our approach to clean energy, and what we think really is going to happen in energy here in Barbados. And so I'll start with that background because I believe that having a good overall view of where energy can go is an extremely important part. And having a strategy to make that happen is really how it all happens in the best possible way. So as Sarah said earlier, I've been CEO of Emera since late 2004. And the very first thing that I did when I became CEO is form a new team. And that new team took a good hard look at where the business was going, and we created a new strategy. And so all the way back to 2005, Emera has believed that clean energy was the way forward. And we've been practicing that, and we've been working towards clean energy investments ever since. And even as far back as 1992, our companies have been focused on cleaner investments. In fact, since '92, we've installed only renewables and high-efficiency systems, most of which have been natural gas-fired. And so when you think about that over that period, that's allowed us to be in a very, very good position to adopt some of the new technologies that are now coming out and available, and some of them that we'll talk about tonight. Since we've been involved here in Barbados, and that goes back now to 2010, we very much believed that Barbados could be an electric economy. And for that, that means a clean economy. In fact, I think Barbados has the ability to be a showcase for the world. And that is the kind of vision that we would see as being possible for Barbados. And a lot of things are happening now that I think can make that happen. This is, in fact, the headquarters for Emera's Caribbean operations. And you see that by the fact that Sarah's here, as she's responsible for all of our Caribbean operations. And we've just changed the name today of Light and Power Holdings to Emera Caribbean Incorporated. And so what you should take from that is Emera is committed to this country, to this region, and to clean energy and a clean energy future. And so with that, maybe just a little bit more about the company itself. So Emera is an energy and services company. It's based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. We have slightly more than $9 billion worth of assets. We trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange at slightly more than $5 billion of market cap. And we have about $2.6 billion of revenue. We're directly invested in 8 electric utilities, serving almost 900,000 customers, 2 pipelines, one of which serves an LNG system, a services business, which moves upwards of 1 billion cubic feet of natural gas a day in the New England market, 4 independent power producers that are gas-fired, and most of them serve the Northeast market. We have a 600 megawatt pump storage hydro plant, which we use to store clean energy. And we also are invested in wind right across the region. A biomass facility working as an independent power producer, and our indirect investments in a company called Algonquin Power see us invested in utilities across 10 states in the United States and clean generation, including 800 megawatts of wind, 150 megawatts of hydro, and 2 new solar farms in California and Ontario. So as you can see, this business is very much involved in renewable energy, and it's a very big focus of us right now and in our future. It's, in fact, very central to our strategy. And the other thing you can see from that map is that we're concentrated in northeastern North America and in the Caribbean region. Those are the 2 places where we do business. So, the next step is strategy. So where are we with strategy, and how does that fit with what's going on here in Barbados? Well, first of all, we think that the market opportunity that exists for us is one associated with the demand for cleaner, affordable energy. And that's being driven globally. It's not just an issue that's going on here in Barbados, it's a global issue. And whether that's from environmental regulations and standard changes, or social and political demands, or fuel source diversification, or energy independence and stability. Each and every one of those things are part of the drivers that are actually driving a need for affordable, cleaner energy. And I emphasize the word affordable, because it does need to be affordable if our customers are going to be able to consume it. So how do we do that? Well, the strategy is to use our unique linkages and adjacencies to our assets and capabilities, and to build relationships to create these development opportunities. And our focus is on investing directly in renewables, investing in transmission, because in general, renewables are remote from where customers are, investing in gas generation and gas transportation, because gas is a very important transition fuel. And then last but not least, investing in utilities when those opportunities come along. But the first 3 items are the core focus of our strategy. And then last, to the bottom of the slide, you see a number of the different initiatives that we have on the go. And I would highlight a few of them. First of all, the greening of generation. And so it is a transition issue that we're talking about, and it's a transition issue for all of our customer bases. The renewal of aging facilities, because that is a big part of the opportunity. if you can have mostly depreciated assets replaced by clean assets, that's the lowest cost way for that to happen for customers. And then last but not least, our fuel to asset strategies. Because if you can replace fuel with an asset that has long life, then you can also reduce costs for customers, or at least stabilize and create affordable opportunities for customers. And an example of that would be putting a solar project in place. If that solar project can meet or beat the cost of fuel, and it will be there for 20 or 25 years, then you've replaced that fuel for that 25-year period, and you reduce costs for customers over that whole period. So that's a very important part of how we see the future unfolding. And I can't stand up here and talk to you about what's going on in Emera without talking about our largest project that we have on the go. And our largest project is a connection between the mainland of Labrador, which is on the east coast of Canada, the island of Newfoundland, and Nova Scotia. It's an $8.5 billion project that will bring 5 terawatt-hours of clean energy to the market in Atlantic Canada and the northeastern North America. So it is a very exciting project. Our part of it is about $2 billion of investment, but it's going to build a new hydro plant in central Newfoundland at a place called Muskrat Falls. It's going to build over 2,000 kilometers of new AC and DC transmission, and we are going to bring clean energy to the market like it's never seen before. And that is an enabling effort for Atlantic Canada to become much, much cleaner than it otherwise could. And so that's the kind of project that we think is very important. The specific part of the project that we're working on is this piece, which is called the Maritime Link. And it is a project that will see about 400 kilometers of transmission built both over land and undersea. And it will link the island of Newfoundland to the mainland of Canada for the very first time in history. So it will change things dramatically and ultimately creates a new transmission loop around Atlantic Canada and through Quebec. So it's a very important initiative, but it's central to the type of strategy that we implement. And it's central to the kind of thinking that Emera has when we think about clean energy for the future. This is an affordable project for Nova Scotians, it's an affordable project for Newfoundlanders, and this will create new clean energy for all of northeastern North America. So that's the type of thing that we see ourselves involved in. So back to the challenge at hand, because these are challenges and opportunities at the same time. And maybe I'll just start with a global point of view, and that is, as I said earlier, every single developed jurisdiction in the world is focused on cleaning up its energy system. And so what's going on here in Barbados is not unique. In fact, it's in line and in time with what's going on in the rest of the world. And the challenges are different in every market, but the same challenge is the case. And so just by example, in the case of Canada, today in Canada we produce only about 26% of our electricity from hydrocarbons. Most of the energy in Canada is produced from hydro, about 65% hydro, and the rest is from nuclear. And so in fact we're blessed with a low concentration of hydrocarbons today, but we're still focused on eliminating them. And in fact by 2050 Canada will be down to 5% hydrocarbon in its electricity system. If I go to Nova Scotia, where our native utility exists, we currently have 20% renewables in our portfolio. We will have 40% by 2020, and we'll have the ability, between 2020 and 2030, we'll have the ability to hit 70% clean energy sources. And a lot of the incremental above that will be gas-fired, and so that's pretty clean from a hydrocarbon perspective. So when you look at that, that's a transition from 10 years ago, we would have been about 90% hydrocarbon, and so by 2025, we'll be more like 70% clean. So that's the kind of transformation that's happening in that marketplace. And then if I go to New England, another place where we do a lot of business today, right now they're about 65% hydrocarbon, and by 2050 they will be under 20% hydrocarbon. So everybody is taking on this same challenge, but they're all doing it in slightly different ways. And if I go back to Barbados for a minute, as we know, Barbados is focused on 29% clean by 2029. And that's, I think, a very achievable goal, and one that we are working towards as we speak today. So when we think about the challenges, it's about reducing emissions, reducing our concentration of, in the case of Barbados, heavy oil, but usually coal and heavy oil. And it's about ensuring that we actually have the ability to have a sustainable future. Foreign exchange is a huge issue in this market, and one that can be reduced by this type of approach. And last but not least, creating more price stability. Price stability will come from clean energy sources that do not require fuel. And so that's a great opportunity for the future. And just another point I would make is when you think about heavy fuel oil or bunker C oil, the availability of that fuel is changing on an ongoing basis. It is getting less available all the time. And it is the lower cost source that we have today. But as refineries upgrade and as they get to having more coking capacity, there will be less and less heavy fuel oil available. And so from that point alone, we are moving in the right direction, because our supplies will ultimately be harder and harder to come by. So just start talking about some of the things that are actually happening here right now. But before I talk about the Renewable Energy Rider, I just want to talk a little bit about Emera's entry into this market, because I think it should appear to you that Barbados Light and Power is making a rapid change. And in fact, I would say that that is the case. Barbados Light and Power is changing its approach to clean energy on a very rapid basis. And the reason for that, I believe, starts off with our entry to the market in 2010. Something I've said, and I've said it many times, and I would say it even today, is that Barbados Light and Power is one of, if not the best operated utility in the Caribbean region. It is a very strong utility, very capable, and does a very good job. But I think it became clear to us, and so when we entered the market in 2010, we very much said to Barbados Light and Power, you're doing a great job, keep doing it. That's the right thing to happen, and that's the way things should go. But by 2012, it became quite clear to us that there was a significant disconnect between the utility and the customers on the pace at which renewables should be introduced in this market. And so since when we think about renewables, we think about that as being a central part of our strategy, within the last 18 months, you will have seen that Emera has gotten much more involved in the strategy relative to renewables. And I believe that's why you're seeing a change in the pace of introduction of renewables in this market. So, Barbados Light and Power introduced the Renewable Energy Rider in 2010, and that's about installing solar PV systems in small sizes in customer premises. And that program's been very, very successful. In fact, more than 6 megawatts of capacity has been installed, and there's probably at least another 6 megawatts that's waiting to begin to move forward. It's created an estimated 500 jobs in the local economy over this past 2 years, but to date, that's actually only affected about 0.5% of our customer base. And so the opportunity is there to begin to affect more and more of the customer base and to do more and more of this. In fact, one of the things that we did as we started to change strategy is we looked very hard at what the level of renewables that could really be put in this market. And so we commissioned a renewable intermittency study because of the fact that solar is not there all the time. It's only there when the sun is shining and when the clouds are not covering. We had to see how much of that type of energy could this market take. And so that study is not complete yet, but what I can tell you about it is definitely pointing to a higher amount of solar that can be added to this system than we originally had thought. And that's very good news. That's good news for customers, that's good news for the market, that's good news for the people that are actually installing these things. And as well, how this electricity system is set up for renewables is an important part of where we are and what's happening. In fact, I spoke to the Global Ocean Energy Group just 2 weeks ago, and my topic to them was preparing Nova Scotia to take on more renewables. Because we in Nova Scotia as well have been limited as to how many renewables we could put on the system, but we've made changes to the system, things like the Maritime Link, the connection to Newfoundland, that now take the cap off of our ability to add renewables to that market. And so it's important to think about and to work on enabling more renewables to be added to this market, just like we've done in other places. So another thing that's very, very important as you're moving forward with clean energy, and especially with solar energy, is the introduction of utility scale solar. And I mentioned earlier when I talked about Algonquin Power that they have now installed 2 utility class units, one in California and one in Ontario. And so we do have experience within our organization in installing utility class solar. In fact, we have a project now at St. Lucie that will see at least 8, and I think the intermittency study may push it above 8, but at least 8 megawatts of new utility class solar being added. And the beauty of adding solar at that scale is that we can do it at a significantly lower cost, as much as a third to a half of the cost of doing it in smaller increments. And so far, the team is doing a great job at getting the lowest possible cost, and that will end up resulting in lower costs for customers. And so we're very, 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 very committed to that. And it really is that as we're able to introduce more and more of these types of supplies, then we're going to be able to see a much different system, especially as it comes to the stability of price, the predictability of price, and our ability to move forward. Another thing that's important as we advance a system and make the system much, much better at being able to introduce clean energy is the introduction of new metering systems. So metering systems can make a huge difference to our ability to integrate, to our ability to control. So for instance, a utility class solar project can be controlled. If it's producing too much at a point, you can turn it back. And so the more you can control these things, then the better off we'll be. The other thing about advanced metering is that customers will have more control of their own consumption. They'll be able to see how much they're consuming. They'll be able to see how much they're producing if in fact they have a system. And they'll be able to balance their own needs in a very, very constructive way. And so advanced metering systems will make a difference. And in fact, we believe advanced metering systems will allow customers to reduce their costs. And reducing costs for customers is a critical thing for a utility to do. Because it's a whole lot more important to have a large number of customers at a lower cost than a small number of customers at a higher cost. And the more we can make electricity part of the growth of this economy, then the better that is for the business and for the customers and for the economy. So we are piloting that technology in 2015, and we do believe that it is going to be a very important part of our future. The cheapest megawatt or kilowatt that you ever consume is the one that didn't have to be consumed because you found an efficient way to consume it. Another thing that Emera is very, very focused on, and I know Barbados Light and Power has been focused on this for quite a long time as well, it's actually getting wind into this market. Because wind is another very, very important element of producing clean energy in a market, and you have such a wonderful wind resource. The wind resource here is very strong and very good. And so now the question is, how do we actually make that work? Because what you also have, though, is a bit of a lack of supply of open land. And so it really is a matter of how do we make this all work? So in fact, Emera is very invested in wind. We have more than 500 megawatts of wind in our system these days. And as well, we're also invested in the movement towards other ways to make wind happen. And so on the one hand, on the left-hand side, what you see is a traditional wind turbine. In this particular case, one that exists in Nova Scotia that probably produces between 2 and 3 megawatts at peak. And in Nova Scotia, we'd have a capacity factor of something between 35 and 40%, so a very solid resource. But then on the right-hand side, what you see is the Aquaventus partnership that we've formed with the University of Maine at Orono. And that particular unit is a 1/8 scale model. It's actually 1/8 scale of a very large model. So it's operational. It's got about a 150 kilowatt machine on top of it, and it is floating off the coast of Maine, producing electricity cabled to the system. And the beauty of this particular type of technology is that it's actually made of concrete. So the entire floating system, or the 3 pontoons that you see, are all made of concrete, pre-stressed and post-stressed concrete. And so, when we look at that particular design, we would say that there's probably a design of that nature that could work in this market. And you have access to concrete. You make your own concrete today, or cement today, and so therefore you can make concrete. And so the percentage of the project that could get done in this market is higher with this type of possibility. So one of our people is working towards a design that would allow us to look at a pilot for this market. And so this is the kind of thing that could advance energy in this marketplace in a way that may not have been possible in the past. Another example of projects that we're working on that we believe will work in this market are firm renewables through biofuels. And so we have a pilot project on the go right now in the Bahamas where we are growing the Tropha plant that will ultimately produce oil that we can then burn in our units in that market. And we believe here there are potential opportunities for things like Eutropha or maybe other possible plants that could deliver opportunities. And I know that Barbados Light and Power right now is working on a vegetable oil project that will see them displacing diesel fuel in trucks. And so there are opportunities with clean energy in lots of different ways, whether oil-based or simply combustion-based. There are opportunities because of the great growing climate you have and the fact that you have arable land. It's very possible that we can find ways to use biofuels as part of your future as well. And as well, we're working on geothermal, both in Dominica and in St. Vincent, and so we think that there are opportunities, at least on those islands, for those types of things as well. But if a large enough project were to be instituted on one of those islands, then the possibility of actually cabling, as we're doing with Maritime Link, to other islands is a very big possibility as well. So, where else are we going? And certainly this is another area where Barbados can become a very significant leader in the world, and that is on electric vehicles. In fact, I have personal experience with this. I drive a Volt back and forth from my home to work every day, and I take great pride in not having the gasoline portion of that hybrid ever come on. And in fact, with a Volt, that's possible because it's an all-electric hybrid. And so, if I just take my own experience again for a moment, If I was driving that same vehicle back and forth and it was on gasoline, I'd spend probably $5 to $8 per day driving that unit back and forth. Whereas on electricity, I'm spending $1.20. And I think what we've determined is that prices that approach certainly that approach 40 and 50 cents are very, very economic for gasoline, or for displacement of gasoline. And I know that right here, certainly Megapower has been doing an awful lot of work in this area, and there are 50 proud electric vehicle holders in this market as we sit today. At Barbados Light and Power, we have 3. In fact, I drove here tonight with Sarah in hers, even though there was lots of traffic and it was very dark, we still made it without any trouble at all. But Barbados Light and Power is in the process of working with others, including Megapower, to ensure that charging stations exist and that people feel confident that they can drive their electric vehicles. And I do think that this is one of the ways that electricity can play a very important role. So clean electricity from solar power going into an electric vehicle will displace hydrocarbons in a very big way. And it does have to be part of how the future does unfold. Another thing that we're working towards, and that is the possibility of producing power to docked cruise ships. In fact, we've just done a project in Nova Scotia where we now are powering cruise ships at the dock. Each cruise ship that comes in takes about 8 megawatts, and it saves a tremendous amount of CO2. And not only CO2, but just when those diesels are running at such low combustion points, they actually produce a lot of soot and everything as well. And so it just is a much, much cleaner outcome. And I think for this market, it's just one more clean offering that you can have for your tourist industry, which is obviously extremely important. So another thing that we just can't forget, and that is that as we think about how we're going to enable this market to have a much higher penetration of renewables, storage is likely going to have to be part of the solution. And as I said earlier in my remarks, we actually own a pumped storage hydro plant in western Massachusetts today. So we know all about pumped storage, and we use it to store clean energy today. We're also working with a company called Lightsail Energy to produce a compressed air system that could in fact be a good way to store energy. There are flywheels which are becoming more and more cost effective, and so and even battery technology is moving forward in a great way. I think that is going to be part of our future here, and it will be part of how we enable a much, much deeper penetration of renewables. Ocean energy is another thing, and in large part I'll wrap up with this point, but we are doing a tremendous amount of work with ocean energy. We have a partnership with a company called DCNS, which is the French shipbuilding company owned by the French government. We have a partnership with them on a company called Open Hydro, and we're installing streamflow tidal units in the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia. They are working on a pilot project in Martinique that would see ocean thermal energy developed. And so whether it's ocean currents producing energy or whether it's ocean thermal energy, I do believe that the oceans will be a part of our future as well, and they can provide some very, very stable output. The project we're doing in Nova Scotia right now is about a $50 million project, and it will be the first grid-connected tidal array in the world. And so that's the kind of project that we're very proud to be working on. So with that, and in closing, I would say that the research and initiatives and activities, pre-commercial and commercial, that are going on both in this market and around the world, they take innovative workforce, they take partnerships, they take partnerships with government, with stakeholders, with customers. And so that's what we want to foster in this market. We believe we can stabilize and eventually reduce the cost of electricity as a result of bringing these technologies to bear. And we also believe that working together we can find solutions that very much work for Barbados, and are sustainable for the long-term future. So Emera is very proud to be a partner in this market, and we're also very proud to be very involved in renewable and clean energy transition and transformation that certainly can happen right here. As I said earlier, we believe Barbados can be 100% electric, and we believe 100% electric is 100% clean, and that is a really great showcase for the world. So with that, I'll thank you very much, and certainly happy to take any questions that you might have.
Every time I sit and listen to Chris Huskilson, there's always much to learn. I hope you did enjoy that this evening and that you did learn something too. We're going to give you the opportunity to ask your questions, and Chris is going to be available to answer. And Sarah, maybe if you want to join him on the stage again, you can do so. So, taking your questions, again, my reminder to the members of the media, we are going to entertain you for half an hour after the lecture session so that you can ask your questions directly. So given this opportunity to our stakeholders at this time. So, question number one.
I must say that I'm heartened by your presentation, Mr. Huskilson, and I think it's always good to shed some light on the history behind Emera and the depth of investment you've made, particularly in renewables. There were two telling points that came out in your presentation. And that's the initial point you made in relation to a coherent strategy with respect to the deployment of renewables, and secondly, the point in relation to price stability.
Right.
And from the association, we have some concerns with respect to the first point in terms of a coherent strategy. We know Light and Power would have completed their IRP. We know there would have been several developments that would have occurred since that was published. And our concern is that to date, there's still no coherent strategy as to how we would even achieve our initial target of the 29% by 2029 in relation to which technologies, how they'll be deployed. And a lot of that is contingent on your intermittency study. So the first question would be, what steps would Emera and Light and Power take with respect to meeting and partnering with the various stakeholders to craft that coherent strategy? Because our opinion right now is that currently there's none. The second issue has to do with price stability. And price stability is more or less connected to the question of the absence of a coherent strategy, because we see some projects which, even in your IRP report, there's been some, what I can say, subtle concern with respect to the potential price, for instance, in relation to the electricity produced. And one such project is the waste-to-energy project. And what I would like to hear from you this evening is, what stance would the utility company take with respect to ensuring that that price stability is assured for the consumers in Barbados, given the concerns over the prospective pricing at this stage for that project? Two brief questions.
Okay, well, that's great. Two pretty comprehensive questions, I think I would call them. Well, so first of all, from a coherent strategy perspective, and I'll ask Sarah to chime in as well, but I would say that Barbados has started in a very similar place to the way both the Atlantic Canada and New England has started. And that is that there are some ideas of some things that can be added and some things that are just kind of generically, they work. And so examples of that would be the renewable rider, because that has actually just worked. It's reduced costs for customers, both in home and also for broader customers. But then the question was, okay, so that works, but how far can you go? And it's almost always the case that you come to the point of the unknown. And it's because we are actually all actually creating a new environment. And almost every market, almost every system, it has somewhat of a difference. Isolated systems that exist on the islands actually have some very special opportunities and challenges, I'd say. And so, to some extent, we have to create and learn and create again in order to get there. And so I think what you saw from the first iteration of the IRP, and I'd say it that way because it was informed with the information that was available at the time, With that first iteration, that produced an outcome. I think what you'd find is that Emera and Barbados Light and Power were uncomfortable with that outcome, although it was what it was. It was the outcome with the data and information we had at the time. And we said we need more information. In fact, Sarah and I sat with the Energy Minister and the Prime Minister and suggested that it was time that we did do this intermittency study, because we do need to know more about what the art of the possible is. And what you see happening both in Atlantic Canada and in New England right now is people working more on the art of the possible so that they know more, so that they then can further the strategy. So I don't know that I would say that there's not a coherent strategy, because the first stage of the strategy is looking at what the art of the possible is. And I think until we get that work done, and until we begin to experience some of the outcomes that come from that work. So for instance, the intermittency study is going to show you two things. It's going to show you what the system can actually accommodate in its existing state with no other changes. And then over time, we're going to be able to look at, and what kind of changes can we make that will allow it to do more. And so if I just take the Nova Scotia example for a second, we determined that the most wind we could put on the Nova Scotia system in its original configuration was 27%. And so we worked a way to get to, and I think for this year we'll be at 25%. And then we said, okay, how can we, the customer base wants to go further. How can we go further? And we looked at a number of different alternatives, and in our case, we really had probably three. We could have taken on a much greater strategy in biofuels, and that was something where we had the resources and we could do that, and that could allow more. We could simply put some mitigation technologies in place, like pump storage hydro, or we could look to a new resource. And in the case of Nova Scotia, we chose to look to a new resource in Labrador and make a connection to that resource, and now the art of the possible is very different. And so we could have picked any of those three routes, but until we started to look at those various things, we couldn't really make that cohesive strategy. And so I think you're going to see that the strategy is going to be something that we iterate over time as we both learn and create more. The question of Rob Bennett, our Chief Operating Officer, sitting down there in the front row, he's now talking about liquid batteries and that technology, and it's emerging. We're talking about storing air as being one of the ways to mitigate. Very, very different cost structures, very, very different potential. But until we understand what can be done, until we put a floating wind turbine offshore here, those things have to be done before we can get to that fully cohesive strategy. But the beauty is we have time. And because we have time, we should work diligently towards that outcome. So let's get the intermittency study completed. Let's look at mitigation strategies that are currently available and emerging. Let's see what that then does, and then create a strategy around that. That'll be kind of IRP 2, and then we'll continue to go on. Now you asked also about how we work together. I'm going to let Sarah talk about that more specifically.
In terms of how we work together, we have the intermittency study is a good example. We did actually invite participation from the Department of Energy, from BRIA, from other stakeholders to say, what other information would you like to have in this study, rather than have two separate studies, and reduce costs and reduce the time. And so we're willing to partner with, we continue to work with your organization to find ways to work together. We're working with industrial partners. An example would be, I'm also responsible for Grand Bahama. We're working with our industrials to bring natural gas, compressed natural gas to the island, which may not be an option in Barbados at this time, at least cost effective, but if we can get the industrials to sign on to use some of it, and they have the capability of using natural gas in their systems, and we can bring natural gas to them, that helps them reduce their costs and they continue to grow, then that's a win-win situation. So we are open to discussions with government, with industry, with our stakeholders like BRIA to find any solution that we can. You know, I hope that our representation has been made clear that that's the case, and if it's not, you know where to find me. But our goal throughout all our businesses, as Chris would have described, is almost always partnerships. We feel that adds the most value. We don't have the expertise in every single area. We're not OTEC experts, but we're going to find the ones who are, and we're going to make sure we stay on top of the emerging technologies by partnering. So that's really our strategy in all our regions. And you know, I just want to comment on the cohesive strategy. You know, it's been a challenge for us internally too, because everything is changing so fast. You know, from the initial integrated resource plan, when we, you know, in 6 months we reran the numbers, and because the price of solar installation went down, all of a sudden the result was in fact that you could install, that the right price point was solar in 6 months. I mean, the market is changing dramatically, and we're trying to stay ahead of it. And so while it may feel like it's not coherent, I think the pieces are finally, personally for me, as the leader of the people standing in front of the board explaining it, is starting to come together because we have all the pieces. So once we get that intermittency study, we have a better sense of what the load demand is going to be. We're looking at the demand side management study, which will also inform us of how customers are going to start consuming less, which is good, but we also have to manage that within our business, and how do we make sure that the system stays stable. So, you know, I can appreciate why it may appear that it's not coherent, but I really think that we're getting very close to being able to, you know, very specifically say what our next steps are going to be as Barbados Light and Power.
I want to talk a little bit about price stability, because I think price stability is going to come from two things. First of all, if you take a utility class solar unit going on the system right now, we believe that that's actually going to at least meet or beat the cost of fuel. And so if you look at that unit over time as it depreciates and still produces essentially the same amount of energy, that's going to be a declining price for that particular part of the energy source. So there's a real great opportunity there that will bring stability to the market. But again, that will be one step at a time. The other thing that we can do and we must do is actually get into fuel hedging for this market. We've been hedging our fuel in most of the markets where we do business for a very long time, certainly for decades, if not more. And we've just, in the past year and a half, introduced fuel hedging to the Bahamas market, and already we're beginning to see great opportunities from that, especially with the current decline in fuel prices. And so we think that that's going to be another element that needs to be layered into this market to create more stability. And you know, if the current trend continues for a bit of time and we're able to take some longer term hedges and put them in place, then that can make some headroom again for more renewables into this market, the ones that don't necessarily beat the current fuel. So, you know, it's all about ensuring that we do this in a very thoughtful way, and ensuring that we have a visibility to long-term fuel prices is a big part of that, because we will still have fuel in this market for some time to come, and as we do, then the better we can almost control, but at least have visibility to the outcome, then the more stability we'll have in our market. And you know, that should be much better for the economy, because at the end of the day, customers can plan when they know what the next number of years is going to look like, and it's going to take that kind of activity to make that the case. So hopefully we got to your questions.
How much consideration have you given to building hydro storage about it?
What we're mostly looking at right now is compressed air, primarily because it's a much simpler, lower capital, less capital intense approach. And so we have been looking more seriously at compressed air, and as I said earlier, we've got a pilot project, pre-commercial project on the go in Nova Scotia right now with a company called Lightsail Energy, where they're actually producing really quite cool air from a compressor technology and putting it into essentially compressed natural gas storage containers. We think the possibility of actually having deep sea storage is also there. And so at this moment, we're kind of heading down that path just because of the lower capital intensity of that particular type of project. But as I said earlier, we do own pump storage, and we do understand both the costs and the approach. And so, you know, that's something that we can look at, or we're happy to look at with others if people have some ideas. But at this moment, I think that's where we're headed. The other thing is that this idea of battery technology is just moving at light speed. And so even batteries and flywheels are things that we can't ignore because there's a couple of different things you're trying to stabilize. Sometimes you're trying to store the energy, and sometimes you're just trying to make it smoother. So there's some very, very interesting flywheel technology that's been developed that really does a very good job smoothing the output of things like solar activities. And so all those different types of technologies will ultimately come to bear in this market to make the system much, much more stable and to allow more and more renewables to be added. Yes, sir.
We've heard a lot from a German professor, about 100% move towards full electric economy in Barbados and how soon it can be done. It's easy to be done, and actually we've had a plan on that. At the same time, many Barbadians are feeling the pinch from electricity rates, and they have been opting over, I'd say within the last decade or so, to simply go off the grid. And despite all the talk about how expensive batteries are, et cetera, there are in fact low-income earning Barbadians who are off the grid. And my question, sir, is to what extent do you see this movement towards going off the grid, which is driven by expected increases in electricity rates, economic challenges, and that sort of thing? To what extent do you see that as a concern for the movement towards 100% renewable energy or renewable economy? Thank you.
That's a very interesting question because you know, one of the challenges with having the grid disintegrate, if that's really a way of putting what you're talking about, is that you no longer get to share across the electricity system and among customers. And so an example of that that's going on right here, right now, is the fact that the 0.5% of people that have put solar panels on their roof or in their businesses are actually getting to see a lower cost because of that opportunity, and so are the rest of the customers. And so if all those people who were actually installing solar panels were off the grid, then that same relationship wouldn't exist. And so, you know, I guess I would say that our job and our focus is to produce electricity in this market at the lowest possible cost and the most stable cost that we can. And you know, we work towards that every day. Barbados Light and Power, I think, has been really focused on that issue. A part of how we're doing that these days is looking at our existing assets, how they can be operated in different ways, and how that can turn into a better outcome. We're looking at things like hedging, which in a falling market can be good for stability for the future. And we're looking at all the different efficiency tools that we can use, because even you know, we talked about automated metering. Automated metering can help to reduce costs as well, because you know, we actually have a project that we've worked on with our neighboring utility in Atlantic Canada called Reduce and Shift Demand. And that particular approach actually lowers costs for all customers as you look at managing the appliance the appliance use of the electric system. So, I mean, those are the things that certainly come to mind and important aspects. And I don't know, Sarah, is there anything you'd like to add?
It's a bit of a catch-22 and a conundrum, you say. So we're promoting a decline in sales, and so we've seen our sales decline, which is obviously impacting us. But we recognize that the only way to ensure that those sales come back or we find a different approach is if we keep our costs down. So I can say that Barbados Light and Power has been, since we've been involved, has been in the bottom third in terms of costs in the Caribbean. And through our work in Grand Bahama and our other work in Lusalek, all three of those companies are in the bottom third. So while we recognize that's no solace for people who are currently paying it, we are performing well in comparison, and the operating team is very focused on trying to bring that down, because we know if we're able to lower the price, people will consume more or businesses will come, and that's where our growth will have to come from. And so it's working right now in Grand Bahama. We believe it can work here in Barbados as well.
Grantley Haynes, ex-employee or retired employee of Light and Power. I've had about 25 years in which half was technical and the other half human resources. I'm into the human resources now. I've listened to your presentation and you've spoken a lot about the organization and the customer, but I haven't heard the exciting things that would happen to the employees, because I think that's where the company exists, around the employees. So can you speak to some of the exciting things that coming out of renewables that would make employees feel comfortable that they've got a future in the company and future with respect to the renewables?
Absolutely, and I mean, you're absolutely right that that employees are the heart and soul of an organization. I did mention earlier that in fact innovations only come when you actually have an engaged employee group and you have people looking for those innovations and looking for that future. So I think the very first thing is the most important thing for stability for employees is to have a stable business. And as Sarah has said, at this moment our business is shrinking, and so we absolutely need to create more stability around it, and that is about creating the absolute best environment for customers. Because when customers can see a good future and they can see stability, then they're going to consume the product, and that's a fundamental starting point. But employees are critical to that. They're critical to coming up with all the different ideas that have to be put together, working in teams, really just being involved in some of these technologies. All those things are extremely exciting for people because they get to do new things and try new things, and at the end of the day produce really well for their customers. And that's, I find that employees are most proud when they do a good job for a customer. That really does make a difference.
We are doing a number of things. We're sharing our vision. You'll see a number of Barbados Light and Power employees here this evening, which is wonderful because they get to hear the vision. We've been talking a lot more about where we're headed and about the need for change, and recognizing that is, it can create some uncertainty. So the more information we can share with them and explain what our vision is, the better. So we've actually got them engaged in teams to look at how we can be more efficient. We're trying to make sure no idea is too small or too uninspirational, because we think all of these things will make a difference. So the teams are engaged in that. The other thing that's really offered opportunities is the sharing among all of our utilities. So Chris mentioned earlier, we did have a special shareholders meeting where the name of Light and Power Holdings was changed to Emera Caribbean, Inc. Barbados Light and Power is still in place. So I don't want to stress that. Barbados, Mr. Ready Kilowatt is still in place. But what employees are starting to see is opportunities on other islands. So we've had an exchange program. So we've got employees from Barbados who have been working in Grand Bahama and in Dominica on various projects for some as long as 6 months. and some just shorter term projects. We've even, from an Emera perspective, we've had one of our employees participate in some due diligence in some assets that the company's looking at in Canada. So they were able to go and participate and learn from, you know, which would not be an opportunity they would have had otherwise, which a number, particularly our younger employees, are really excited about, because it can be very isolating at times to be, you know, the only group of power employees on one place. And if you can have that chance to get involved, each of the teams, there's a number of Emera executives here. The finance team brings the finance group together a couple of times a year to talk about, to make sure we're sharing our knowledge and sharing information. Emera, the management team, we're identifying high potentials within the organization who participate in the Emera Leading Emera program, which is put on in Halifax. And so we're trying to make sure that we're preparing our employees for a future and making sure they understand what that future looks like. So we continue to work at that, and it is a big effort for us.
Okay.
Oh yes, and that's right. So I am interim managing director, but the managing director to be is Roger Blackman, and so he's actually taken an 18 to 24 month secondment to Nova Scotia. He's doing some wonderful projects, working on some projects in Maine. He's working in New Brunswick. He's gone to Boston, and from everything we hear, he and his family are adjusting well. And of course, they've just hit winter, so we'll have to see what they think about after the first snowfall. But Roger is hoping that his two sons love skiing, and so do we. So again, that's just another great example of how people can see how being involved with this bigger group is of value.
Well, and again, just to say a little bit something about Roger. So Roger is actually currently working on an integrated resource plan for New England. So we have decided that the only way that we can really make a difference in our position in New England is to actually have a very, very good understanding of where they might go, what the art of the possible is for that market. That's a huge market, 150 terawatt hours of energy, whereas Barbados is about 1, I think. So it's a very huge market, and Roger is leading the team that is actually doing an IRP for that market. And so that's going to inform our strategy in that marketplace in a very big way. And you know, I think it'll certainly be a growth opportunity for him too, which is a great thing.
First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for coming and giving this presentation, and congratulate Peter and Sarah and the team on this dialogue that you've created over the last couple of years. I think that's very important. The second thing is I'd like to thank you for admitting that the IRG was wrong. And I think that takes a lot of courage to stand up and say that is, you know, that was a challenge. That makes us a little nervous about going forward, because, you know, things are changing very quickly. The question I had was, I noted in your very comprehensive discussion that Emera is an IPP in a number of markets, presumably this California solar, the things you're doing in New England. You're not a regulated utility there. Given that you wear multiple hats, how do you see it unfolding in Barbados? Because there's obviously a lot of companies here. There's now, I think, about 20 or 22 PV installers. There's companies who would like to get involved in waste to energy. I see some waste to energy proponents in the audience tonight. How do you see Emera working with these wannabe IPPs, you know, given that you're doing that in a lot of these markets? Thank you.
I think there are really two things that go along with that, and certainly thank you for the question. So first of all, I think it depends on what kind of a market structure that we want to have in this market. And it goes to the off-grid point as well. And so there is work to be done on creating the right and best market structure. And so that work should happen, and it should be collaborative, and it should be one that is participatory. But Sarah said it earlier. I mean, we like partnerships. We like working with people. We think that that when we work together with others, we actually create much better outcomes. And so our view of the world would be, if there are good projects out there that can make a difference to this market and can improve the situation, then we want to help facilitate those happening. That doesn't necessarily mean investment, but it certainly means that we would work to getting the right thing done in order for this market to do well. Because our company won't do well if customers are not doing well. You know, no value gets created ever until customer value gets created. That's just a fundamental. And so, you know, I think if there are projects out there that can actually do that, then let's see how they can be implemented.
My name is Marc Parisien. I'm the new Senior Trade Commissioner at the High Commission of Canada here. I just arrived about a month and a half ago. I didn't even have time to meet your company yet, but I know for Canada, like sustainable energy and renewable energy is a real priority. And I look at Barbados coming from outside and also the Caribbean, because I was previously posted to Beijing in China for 4 years. So every country is facing like major challenges with energy and also pollution. But in the case of I mean, I see, for example, that you said by 2029 you expect that Barbados would be 29% renewable energy. There's still, I mean, a little bit low level compared to other areas, but does that mean that in the meantime, like, what is the strategy for oil? In the case of, for example, Barbados is a bit luckier than other countries in the Caribbean because they don't participate in Petrocaribe from Venezuela, who have this kind of, they have this program. So many countries like Jamaica, they bought a lot of oil, but they actually don't pay the price. So at the end, like, it means that if Venezuela, who's quite unpredictable, arrived tomorrow morning and asked them to pay, it's almost the size of their GDP that they would have to pay back. So because of that, Canada, US, and Mexico is looking at the Caribbean as a whole, and it's a big challenge that they want to make sure that the region is like sustainable and all that. And they're looking at, even at Trinidad and Tobago, which is a country that has a lot of oil. So, and last year also, for the first time in a long time, Canada suddenly sold a lot of oil to Barbados. So, like, what is the challenges that you see with all this coming up? Because in a way, for example, the US now is having also a project in one of the islands, a pilot project to test new technologies. Because from outside, they look at the region as a whole, which is kind of a little bit dependent, and they're a little bit nervous about the situation. We want to make sure the Caribbean is a region that is well, how can I say, that have a lot of energy and that for the future will be good for the environment. So how do you see the strategy and maybe the price of oil to go down, and where do you find your, as it is now? I was not there at the beginning of the presentation, I had another event, but where is the oil is coming for Barbados or the gas? Like where do you look at any market? So anyway, it's a kind of a big question, a discussion, but for me, at the same time, I'm not an expert, but I want to learn a little bit more to how to assist actually to better help Canadian companies and also all the region here to be more sustainable for energy purposes and also the costs to go down.
Well, there's no question you're asking the big question. and I think what the way we would answer that would be to say, you know, we actually have a near term, kind of an intermediate term and a long term. And, you know, the government has set the target that it's set, and I believe that target is very, very reachable. I think the question on the table is, how much further can you go? And really, that's where the work is. There's a lot of work to be done. That's the holistic strategy that we were talking about earlier. That's the challenge. So in the short term, we need to stabilize the prices. And the way to do that is through hedging programs and through efficiency programs. And a combination of hedging and efficiency, things like more advanced metering in people's homes, all those things will help reduce people's consumption of the product. And that'll lower costs for people. In the longer term, we have to have displacement fuels, whether that be biofuels or whether that be gas. You know, we're doing a project right now in the Bahamas where we're going to bring gas into that market. Here it's a little more challenged, but not impossible, and so we have to find ways to get alternative fuels. And then in the longer term, we have to get essentially 100% clean. And that is very possible, but it's going to require mitigation technologies and storage technologies. And so those are the things we have to do, and it's about creating that long-term strategy that gets us from point A to point B. So it's one step at a time.
I saw the regulator getting up just now. You want to come and ask your question? I want to give you that opportunity. Come.
My question is very brief. You've spoken to the conventional island systems throughout your presentation. I was wondering if you've given any thought to regional markets, energy markets that can be developed in the event if we have major disasters.
I certainly think that that regional markets are a critical part of this, and that's where things like gas supply come in. So we do believe that that as we look at alternative fuels, we're going to end up with fuel markets being a big part of that. Obviously, when it comes to the electricity itself, that's isolated to the actual isolated systems. But I think it's on the fuel side, it's on the procurement side. You know, we've been very fortunate, I would say, with the procurements that we're doing right now on the solar side. We're seeing world-class players show up, and we're actually seeing world-class response. I think that's the kind of thing that we could do cooperatively and create more value across the whole region, as well as the potential of even buying groups. So when you put all those things together, I think that's really where the opportunities are. And I don't know, Sarah, is there anything you'd like to?
The obvious challenges from a regional market are, currency, regional pride in many cases, or country pride, and just the systems can be very different. So, even within Emera Caribbean, where we have 4 utilities or 3 utilities that we are majority owners and 20%, trying to get consistency and trying to get shared understanding of what we can do together takes a lot of effort. And so we're more than open in Grand Bahama. We only service Grand Bahama Island, but we're talking with the government, which owns the rest of the utilities in the Bahamas, to say, how can we work with you? If we get gas, can gas help you? So we're certainly open to those opportunities, but we recognize that there are challenges inherent in them.
I want to say thank you to all of you for being here. First, let me start with Chris Huskilson. When we spoke about this opportunity a few weeks ago in Halifax, we thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to bring all our stakeholders together to talk. We've often been hearing the question, why is Emera here? How is Emera going to help the Caribbean? And what next from Emera? And this was the time to get together so he could share with you just that. And I'm sure that you're all happy that you are here. Chris, thank you very much. He said he had just over 24 hours in Barbados. He had 4 meetings today, and this was one of them. We can't but say thank you for making the time for us, and of course we hope that there will be other times like this. Sarah, I want to say thank you to you as well, our interim managing director for Barbados Light and Power. Thank you for being here, and thank you for helping with the question and answers today. I want to say thank you to the directors. I can see them all seated in front of me here. Thank you for being here, especially the 2 from Halifax. That's you, Scott Balfour, and you, Rob Bennett. I know that you're happy to be here in the sun. I hear it's awful weather up in Halifax now, so I'm glad that you're with us this evening. Thank you very much. Again, thank you to the members of the media for being here. I want to say thank you to our representatives from government, Minister Stephen Lashley. Thank you for making the time and for being here. You are now a partner with us, and I want to say thanks to you too, Jerry Blenman, who's also representing the government, and the members of the Fair Trading Commission here. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the management and staff of Premier Event Services for helping us organize this event. Thank you to the management and staff of the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center for hosting us and facilitating the lecture for us this evening. Thank you to the coordinating team from Emera, Emera Caribbean, and from Light and Power. Thank you very much. When I look down at this group, I say it's a real wonderful mix of people, a nice potpourri. I see regulators, I see persons from BRIA, I see installers, I see representatives from the banking institutions, I see students from the UWI, I see employees, a wonderful group this evening. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you've all had a good time from attending. So, thank you, and to all, good night.